Today's episode is sponsored by Zegama Beach Records, who after an incredible year of releases are capping it off tonight at midnight EST with the drop of a brand new sampler featuring unreleased tracks from Maria, Keratin, A Thousand Angels and Seven, Morn Recif, Emma Goldman, Our Future is an Absolute Shadow, Mycel, Aderstad, Blue Youth, and more. Drop by zegamabeachrecords.bandcamp.com to check that out. And while you're at it, don't forget to grab a copy of the Die Princess Die discography cassette, which was recently released as well. That's zegamabeachrecords.bandcamp.com. Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you about our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine. You can go there to sign up, to read zines, get music sneak peeks, and so much more. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. Today's episode is part 2 of our year-end wrap-up, but this time it's not about music. It's about comics, and I chatted with my friends, Randall Avalez and Lainey Williams, the co-creators of my favorite webcomic, Crash Coral, about the best stuff that we read all year, whether it was from 2024 or not. Enjoy. So, it's not necessarily comics that came out this year. We just are all getting together here to talk about the comics that we read this year and that we enjoyed this year, so we can just talk about like the things we liked, maybe some little bit of things we didn't like, but less on that. And hopefully anybody who's listening can get some good recommendations, and hopefully each one of us can get some good recommendations from the other. But I have plenty of stuff here to talk about for sure. But why don't we go ahead and have Lainey start with not necessarily like your favorite one. I don't know if you want to leave your favorite one sort of for last, but just like what are some of the comics that you really enjoyed reading this year?
Well, I think the webcomic that I was just talking about is the one that first comes to mind. I started reading it like December last year. Because someone that I met at like a queer bike group ride recommended it to me, which was it's a wonderful way to find out about a comic, it feels so perfect. But it's called What Happens Next. And it's actually, this person at some point during 2024 moved to Chicago. So now it's a Chicago artist. But it's called What Happens Next. It's by Max Graves. And it's this person, I don't know what his actual background on, but he understands like internet subculture cringe shit from now and then like all the way back to 2000 really well. And the comic like perfectly encapsulates a lot of different types of like shitty but understandable people in a way that it's so well done. It's so fun to read. It's just one of those comics where like no one is good, so you end up kind of liking everyone no matter what they do. But essentially, it sort of spirals out from this one moment, based on like I guess a lot of different real life cosplay murders, where these two 14-year-olds kill their friend, like as part of. You still really don't know what happens, but you start out with like someone who was convicted of being accessory to murder years later, who got out of it on like a mental instability charge and now is out and living in the world, and has a Tumblr, and people are like harassing him on Tumblr all the time and being like, "You're accessory to a murder, we hate you." And he's like, "I'm literally autistic, like you can't blame me for anything I've done. I was being manipulated." And so you get this really interesting vibe. And then he's sort of like, you're introduced to more and more characters that are just very specific types of super online people. And the way it's done, it's really, it's sort of, the paneling is similar to Homestuck. Like it's like a wide frame single panel a lot of the time, but the style is totally different. I'm so sorry, I'm losing an earbud. But the style is totally different, and I don't know. There's just a lot of references that feel like really wrapped up in this world, and something about that makes every event feel so real. And you're constantly caught between like this really specific online thing is so serious to these characters, and you feel the seriousness of that. And there's also a level of like irony poisoning of like full awareness that there is a level of this that is so unserious because most of it is happening online, and there are certain types of frictions between people that really only matter if you spend all your time on Tumblr or Kiwi farms.
Yeah, like it's poking fun at the online culture that is. Yeah. Did you ever read any of those Wendy books? Like
No.
one's called like Wendy Art Genius or something like that.
No.
That sense of humor reminds me of that, where it's like, but this is like poking fun at like art student culture, and it's like sometimes you're like, oh, like this is really funny, like the way they poke fun at like people that really go overboard on like like buzzwords and just like therapy talk and stuff, and sometimes you're like, it cuts like so hard that you're like, this person actually could be like a right winger that hates this stuff. Like they're so good at just like cutting right to that. You're like, I don't know if that's funny. I don't know like how,
Yeah.
But yeah, those, I don't know when those came out either, but those are a couple of books I read this year, those Wendy books. I don't remember what they're called. I think that I want to say that the last name of the author is Scott, but I'm not 100%. I don't have those on hand, and my phone is charging. But yeah, it's like Wendy, Master of Art. I'm pretty sure that's the exact title of one of them. And the other one that I read was like, one's got a blue cover and one's got an orange cover, and everyone has Google, so you can probably figure it out. I wasn't planning on talking about that one necessarily, but that like that humor that you're describing reminded me of that for sure. Yeah, it sounds awesome. I was writing that one down to check that one out for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one sounds interesting.
And the other thing is like, I would say a solid majority of the characters are trans, so they're all also interacting with that and being like public and online in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think the author is also, so I don't know, it's another level of like authenticity, sincerity, and difficulty that gets brought into it.
Yeah. Do you know if any of those have been collected, or like you said, printed? It's still ongoing? But... Yeah,
it's still going on. I don't know. I know that I think he has a Patreon. I don't know if he ever plans on printing it or if he has. But it's like free to read right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. I'll look into it. A lot of times, like something like that, especially if the web comic is popular, like they'll just do like a Kickstarter for it and do. I don't know. Yeah. What about you, Randall? You have you read any? Like, I think you were saying you haven't really been reading web comics, but what have you been reading?
I did read one web comic, and I don't know if it technically. Well, we already said these are all just stuff we read this year.
Yeah.
But it was the Mr. Boop comic by Alec Robbins.
What was it?
I don't know if you guys read it.
Mr. What?
Boop is hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Boop by Alec Robbins.
Okay.
I think it started as like a pandemic thing for him, but he's like a cartoonist and a game designer and stuff. And it's like this absurd strip where it's like he fictionalizes himself as like the hypothetical husband to Betty Boop.
Okay.
So it's like these 4-panel comics most of the time. And just like really dumb
It gets
Yeah.
so crazy.
It does. That's the thing too. Like it spirals. It spirals into like absurd territory. Where like, I guess at one point he got a cease and desist from whoever owns the I don't know, the character, and he incorporates that into the comic. Where like the big Mr. Corporate man doesn't want him to be married to Betty Boop anymore.
It's her dad, I think.
Oh yeah, and it's her dad in the fiction.
And
So,
like she's technically like 16 forever or something, even though she's like 112.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird, really kind of cool.
Yeah, I know like
you
a
know-
bunch of screen printers that I don't understand how like this isn't one of those like public domain characters or something by now, because like every screen printer I know, from like every non-binary screen printer from Philadelphia that I know, has like 7 Betty Boop rips that I'm always just like, I need that one, I need that one. I can't afford any of these, but like I need them, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
yeah,
sounds
I
awesome.
think the collection was put out by like I don't think it was Fancy Graphics, so it
Was
was
it
drawn
Silver
quarterly.
Sprocket? Drawn and quarterly?
It might have been Silver Sprocket.
I don't know. But it was printed. It might have been.
It was, yeah.
Circus.
That's like the publisher I think like that could take all my money is Silver Sprocket. There's so much.
God.
Yeah,
Like I just have tabs and tabs on my phone of like books I hear about, and I just like save them there to like
Yeah,
you know
Silver Sprocket.
fantasize about owning them. Like, oh, awesome, yeah. Like there's this one book that I just heard of called that Silver Sprocket did, which I don't think the collection's actually even available yet, but it's called Crime Hot, and it's like about like these like shape shifting like slash like body modded like weirdos that like
I think that might be the same guy.
rob people and murder people and just screw like all the time.
That sounds like Jonas Goonface to me.
Oh, I know Alec Robbins is doing another comic, and it
Really?
sounds something like that. Like
Yeah.
Crime Hunt.
Well, this one
Oh yeah, you're right. It is Alec Robbins.
I couldn't remember. Like I literally just heard about it and I was like, that sounds so awesome. But like, I don't even. I know that the thing that I saw said that that the collection was up for pre-order. So I don't even know if like you could physically have one yet, except for I was listening to a review where they were given like advanced copies, you know. But yeah, that and I mean, of course, like what was pee pee poo poo or like you know like every time I hear about something from there, I'm like, God, I need to have that, and I just I have no money, so I gotta just like get whoever is in charge of ordering stuff at my library to start ordering from them specifically. But it's I don't know, it's wild. I feel like something that like obviously this is a bit of a late point to make, like 4 almost 5 years into it, but the silver lining sort of on the lockdown and stuff were how many like good like comics that came out of people just being like, this sucks, like I gotta make a comic, and it doesn't have to be about that, but like, did either of you read Dog Biscuits?
Dog Biscuits is the one that my roommate was really obsessed with, and then I was really obsessed with the one that Simon Hanselman did with the
Crisis Zone.
I was checking every
Crisis Zone.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, like that's how I got introduced to Megan Mogg.
Yeah. I was reading Simon Hanselman's stuff a little bit before that, but then like when I was reading Crisis Zone, like I didn't know that it was happening for a long time, so I got to read a lot of it like right away, which was cool. But then that made me be like, the stuff that I've read from Simon Hanselman, like I really enjoy that a lot. Like I would like to actually own those books as for whatever weird, like for whatever demented, like sort of like like they're like a comfort food for me or
Yeah.
something to read these weirdo comics, from
Yeah.
this person. And yeah, it's yeah, I really I can't, think necessarily of a lot of other ones off the hand, but like every time I hear someone say like this was sort of my lockdown comic, I'm like, this is gonna be a banger. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be good for some reason. But yeah,
Or what was the one that Michael DeForge, Birds of Maine? That was
oh,
Michael DeForge's like Instagram lockdown comic, and that was also really good.
I don't. Is
It was
I
that
like
haven't heard of
all
that.
the birds moved to the moon or something.
the person that did like Richard's Valley, or am I thinking of someone else?
Probably like if it's a lot of like really oddly shaped, sort of wiggly people in bright colors, it's probably Michael DeForge.
Oh, well,
It's very like geometric.
Richard's Valley was black and white, but like,
Oh,
yeah, it's like Richard's Valley was like, it's like that this character is a bird, and you're like, that does not look like a fucking bird, but it's really
yeah,
cool. It's like great cartooning.
yeah. Yeah. It's the same person,
Yeah, yeah.
just with a different. But yeah, there's Michael DeForge does really good stuff. Birds of Maine is a really good lockdown comic, and then I also really like from him. I don't remember what it's called, but it's this crazy book where only some people when they hit puberty they turn into trees, but only other tree people can see, but they don't look like trees again. But only other tree people can see that they're part of this. It's like They Live, but
That's
puberty.
interesting.
It's a really bizarre read, but I really liked it. He has a certain kind of introspection that
Yeah,
appears, I feel like, in all the stories.
that Richards Valley is definitely one of those ones where like you're reading it and it's like a lot of goofy nonsense and then three lines that like cut you to the bone. You're like, what the fuck? You're like, oh, I'm screen capping that, I'm taking a picture of that. Like that's very poignant. Yeah, like I said before, I didn't read any web comics this year. I read stuff that I think that I read Lore Olympus from the books from the library, which is a web comic, so there's that. Is Heartstopper also a web comic? Like first and
Yeah,
foremost?
that was originally on
Yeah.
Tapas, which is where I read it.
Yeah. I've
Or at
read
least part
all
of
of that from the library as well, but then like
Did
of
you
course,
like Lore Olympus?
huh?
Did you like Lore
I do
Olympus?
like Lore Olympus.
Okay.
I do. I know that a lot of people have a lot of issues with it, and I understand that. Like, I
Yeah.
can see why people are like, "Ooh, this is, you know, like not like this situation is not something to necessarily like glamorize, but also like we're talking about like we're talking about this realm where these like gods and goddesses and whatever like and you kind of get into that like, well, number one, this is fiction, and then number two, like this fictional scenario is not something that any of us mere mortals could ever actually wrap our minds around anyway. So
Yeah.
so I get it, but like I do enjoy it. I I especially like the way that like specifically like the female characters like address what people could complain about and how they are empowered to like deal with the situations that are understandably like problematic or whatever. But yeah, I was just trying to say the only comic that I actually read on the web this year was y'all's comic. And I've told Randall this before, but there's going to become a point where I can't do this anymore because there's going to be too much of it. But almost every time that y'all do an update, like I go back to the beginning and read the whole thing. And like, I find myself now where like, I know sort of like some of the beginning parts like so well, like I don't even feel like I'm reading it anymore. I'm just like, oh, okay. But yeah, I think it's awesome. It's still going strong. That, of course, is called Crash Coral, and everybody can read it and should read it at crashcoral.com. But yeah, I think that like where Randall initially was like the elevator pitch being like, this is like my version of Spider-Girl, I think it's gone sort of like way beyond that. And it's sort of like, I reread a lot of Love and Rockets this year too, so it like reminds me of Love and Rockets. It does obviously remind me of like, okay, this is Spider-Girl. I see where that comes from, and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's like obviously a lot different than both of those things as well. And yeah, I could sit here and like talk about that or ask you questions about that, but like I think everybody should just go and read that. Like it's not just because we're pals, but like when I see that update, I'm always like, oh yeah, like when I get done drawing or whatever today, I got to get on my iPad and read that update. And sometimes by the time I get done drawing, I got like 12% battery on my iPad, so I don't get to it for a couple days. But it's always like, yeah, I need to get back to this. But
that's so cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. I feel like whenever I would draw a page, I would just be like, and now I sort of yeet it into the ether and it's gone, and like it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to hear that it continues to exist in your world. I don't know. I started a full-time job this year, like at an office. So like the amount of time I have to draw and like energy is significantly diminished. But I just feel like I'm really excited. I have how many chapters did you send me, Randall, for the part 2? You sent me a couple, like 3,
I think just
4?
2.
2? But we sort of went over the outline, and I'm like crazy stoked about it. Like just personally, I have some level of difficulty. I feel like you, Randall, understand like what's interesting about high schoolers a lot better than I do. And if I try to write something about them for myself, I'm always like, I'm bored. They have to go to school all the time. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I get that.
And like where the story is headed next, there's a lot more that's really exciting to me. I guess I shouldn't say too much about it, but I'm just glad that it's something that when you see that there's new stuff, that you look forward to it. That's really cool.
Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't going to ask a bunch of questions, but I do find, what you're saying specifically about like when you're done and like this goes out there, and then, a lot of times you're like, okay, you're as an artist and like this part of it takes us so much more time than the writing part or whatever, generally speaking. So like you don't always have time even to be like, this is what I really liked about what I just finished. Like you said, you put it out there and you're like, what's the next thing? I was already mentally laying that out, but like now I have to actually do it. So just when you're thinking back, sometimes like I've posted 120 pages from my OGN now on my Patreon, patreon.com/human
which
machine.
I've been reading, and it's really good.
Oh, thank you. But out of 100 pages or whatever, right? Like I can mentally bring up like 5 awesome pages that I'm proud of, right? But then when I was posting them, because I drew them all like, and then I was lettering them every day. So that's how I was doing that while I was like sick, because lettering is not as it's more cerebral than physically taxing or whatever, so like while I was lettering them, I was like, no, I swang for it, I went for it on these, and I was more proud of most of the pages where like I thought I was just doing a lot of similar things like you described, like, oh, they're always in school, like how am I going to make this interesting day in and day out? So like when you think back on Crash Coral, like what are your like top 5 that you can think like this was a lot of fun, like this page, like you're obviously probably not going to remember like this was in chapter 3, or maybe you do, maybe you have a different kind of,
Loki, yeah, I do remember. Like,
okay.
So I feel like the whole first chapter, this was like my first ever paying comics gig. And so I was basically terrified for all of chapter 1, like Randall's going to hate this and he's going to fire me and like go hire someone else if I don't do well enough. And so I feel like I went really hard all of chapter 1. And then I was like, I'm exhausted and I have to get better at tapping sometimes, or being like, I don't like this panel, but I don't have time to redo it. So it will be what it is.
Yeah.
And then and so like I feel like if you read through the whole comic, you sort of see me trying to figure out, okay, this was not enough effort, okay, this was too much effort, and also I don't have the skill level, and like trying to calibrate that all the time. And artists do that forever. But the pages that I remember, I either really still love how they look, or I feel like I did a good job trying to give the feeling that it was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
In chapter 1, there is, I think it's chapter 1 where it's either chapter 1 or chapter 2 where they have the show at the warehouse. Do they have the show at the warehouse? And Memo's band plays?
No, yeah, it's chapter 1 actually.
It's chapter 1, yeah, because that's where the first page that I felt like I kicked ass was when Ricky is picking up Coral from in front of the school, and she's like, "Get in, bitch! We're going drunk driving," or something like that. And
yeah, they're gonna steal beers.
Yeah, and I was really proud of her, like this expression. I'm holding up my hands and around my face like this. I just and like I had her hands kind of coming outside the panel. I just felt like that is, you really get the vibe. Which, like, being expressive when your technical skill is not quite there is really hard to do, because then everything is a little bit stiff because you're trying so hard to make it technically good. And that was a moment where I felt like I balanced that well. And then I can't remember if it's chapter 1 or chapter 3, but there's a moment where Coral and Roger are in the pit and they're like bumping into each other, and you can see Roger being like, "We're dancing together," and then kind of getting pushed to the back, and she jumps forward, and then Ricky gives Roger a look like, haha.
Yeah.
I saw that. Is that later?
3 or 4. That's later.
It's later. Yeah, because then right after that is like, that's when he asked her to the dance, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But I remember I liked the layout of that, because all the scenes where there's concert scenes are really hard.
You're really good at them, though. That's what I was going to remark on. Like, all this is a band playing in a group of people. Like, that shit is nightmare fuel for me. But, like, you're really good at it.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's because I get so fucking stressed about it. And I'm like, how do I evoke sound when I don't feel like I'm very good at sound effects? And also draw a crowd, and also draw a drum kit. And, make the band feel unique. Like, there's a lot happening, but
I'm always like, I want to go in as close as I can, so I only have to draw like the one person doing the thing, and then you put arms from the crowd. It's like super cheap, but it looks really cool. But
it looks great.
Yes.
Having arms up is a really good idea. I've never thought of that, and I'm stealing it.
I mean, I certainly am not the first to do it.
Where I have to draw everyone. Like near the very end of part 1 of Crash Coral, there's a crazy wide shot in the barn where you see like 50 people.
Yeah.
That one I remember really liking, because I was like, the way that I had set it up, I felt like this feels like being in the pit, and you feel the moment when they get pulled apart, and I felt like it was working, and it was one of those things where I did, like you said, I took a swing. I didn't think I had it in me, but I decided to try, and then I felt like it worked. And then the other one is chapter 2, which has a lot of really wonky faces and a lot of like awkward poses. There's when because this is when Coral like comes out to Ricky as having superpowers. Not just regular comes out. That's later.
Yeah.
That's a bit later, I think. Yeah.
Quite a bit. But they go to the skate park, and this was another one where I was like, this is going to be so tough. And I spent I think I spent like 2 days watching skate videos. Just like, and screen capping and trying to like practice poses before I ever actually got into actually drawing the page, because I don't know how to fucking skate. So I was like, what does it look like the moment when you drop into a bowl versus when you're going up a ramp? And like, how does that look? And how do I indicate that she's floating a little too high, you know? That was like my first or second time also using models in clip, which I don't really do anymore. But for that one I did, because I was so stressed out about having the like perspective right. So I would like know the pose I wanted to make it, and then turn it so that we were looking from like top of the head or something.
I think it really paid off too, because a lot of stuff. I think we talked about it.
The best pages.
Yeah, and I remember talking about it. I'm forgetting their name now, but the dude who does all the live videos for like hardcore bands nowadays.
Oh, Sonny?
Hate 6?
Yeah, Hate 56.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sonny.
Yeah. I think we talked about, I think I sent you some videos and you were like, yeah, I'm already looking at it. For those like show scenes.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was the first place I went for all of the DIY shows. I was like, I have to go to Hate 6.
Yeah. For sure.
And that's like a very specific, like kind of show too, that I think came across really, really well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you'll read like a music comic, and it'll be like a show in a bar, but it looks like the person has never been to a bar show. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
The person who's illustrating. Like it's still like a stage that's like, you know, like 5 feet high off the ground.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like all kinds of lights that a bar wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's too nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I feel like there was such a long period where I felt guilty for doing anything that wasn't comics. But like working on Crash Coral, I was like, oh my God, thank God I went to all these shitty DIY shows in people's basements.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I wouldn't know what about this makes it seem real.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
For sure.
Because I think that one of the things that you got real good too that I noticed, I've been going back over the early chapters for the annotations I do on my Patreon. And one of the things I think you did real good was like when people crowd the mic to sing along. There's one panel where you did that, and that's something I don't ever see like even when they do like bar shows, like when other people illustrate them. You never see that someone like the vocalist hold up the mic to the crowd.
Well, you won't see me do that in my comic because no one ever does that at my shows. So the one time when someone was singing along at one of our shows, I was so confused. Like I thought there was like something wrong with it. I thought there was like effects on my voice or something. There was like, you know, delay or something. And I was like, no, somebody's actually, yeah. But
yeah, I mean, but you know what I mean though. It happens.
Yeah, no, it does happen.
The bands, not our bands, other people's bands.
Yeah, cool people's bands. Yeah, it's yeah, for sure. I do know exactly what you mean though. It's like it never looks real, or it never looks like we know it to be, you know, like like sometimes there are 13 people and you won't see that, and then sometimes there are 100 people where there are only should be 80, and you won't see that either, you know. So like the realism is like, it's like, you know, an added it's an added element to the story, really, because it keeps people from breaking their suspension of disbelief. Like you're reading this story about this punk rock show, and the next thing you know, you see like this band that's traveling in this beat up van, and there's 3 of them, and they're all wearing like shitty clothes, and the next thing you know, they've got like animatronic and like stage lights behind them, and you're like, that shit ain't like, where was that in the van, you know, like yeah.
The one thing I feel like we haven't done and we should do more of is like really really shitty or like poorly attended shows. which
Yeah,
is
no, I think
special kind of awkward. Like I remember so when I lived in Reno for a while, I dated this guy who was in this is like, before I knew I was like just gay, whatever. But I went on tour with him and we went to like Sacramento and then but there was this show in like a tiny fucking town. It was like outside Sebastopol because they wanted to go to the yerba mate.
Was this in like 2014? This is a very 2014 era.
Close. It was 2018.
Oh, okay.
So, but I think we went on tour and the show was in this warehouse upstairs in like some kind of like DIY performance artist area, and I just remember walking in and they had set up activities and stuff, like something to draw on, something whatever, and there were literally 3 other people in the room. And
wow. Yeah.
it was just like, and it was pouring rain, no one had come out, and the vibe was so off. So I just sat in the front row, and this guy, he was in like a 2-man performance artist band, like they really liked The Garden. And so they were supposed to bring this like really high energy to this completely empty room. And the vibe in that space, like, it's indescribable. It's so bizarre.
those can be really fun though too.
Yeah, exactly.
Way.
Like the right performer can like make that into almost like a slumber party type of crazy fun energy. And I feel like that's something it would be fun to do.
Yeah.
There's that one old like there's that old metalcore band that I remember seeing like videos of, and like I don't remember the name, but they're like it's one of those bands where they're like a white belt kind of like skinny jeans metalcore.
Mm-hmm.
And there's videos of them playing to like 6 people, and like the guitarist like running through all 6 of them, and everyone's just falling around on the ground and like being insane.
Like the guitar thrown over the shoulder, no holds back to all 6 people.
Yeah.
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 We played a show in Phoenix one time that was like, it was 3 other bands, all the bands and all their friends left before we played. We were like begging people to not play last, and nobody would listen. Even the sound person left. Like,
oh my God.
And we were just like, and the mess up thing is the sound person like turned off the PA before they left. So like they left after the 3rd band, and then so we got up there to play, and it was like the PA is off. Like, why is the PA off? So we just went over and turned the PA on and figured, and it was like not even like it was like one of our friends that like runs Protagonist Record, my friend Brendan, and he had taken us out to eat earlier that day. It was great, but he had driven like 3 hours from where he's at in Tucson to come to see us near Phoenix. And the sound person left. We were playing, like the person who booked the show had left. We were playing to like 3 members of one of the other bands, not even the whole other band, not even all the other bands, but like 3 members out of 4 out of one of the other bands, and our one friend. And it was just like, I was just like, I do not fucking care like what happens. And I just got really into like my feelings and like, why am I here? I'm here to sing my songs. Like, this is what we do. And I was just, at the end of that show, I feel like a demon came out of me, and I felt like cleansed by the, light or whatever, this whole experience. Nice. And then one of the people from the other band that had stuck around, out of the 3 out of 4 of them, was like trying to get me to release their band's record. And I was like, that's the only reason they stayed, is so they can pitch me their record. And I was like, geesh. And they compared us to Deftones. And I was like, okay.
What?
Okay.
Yeah, it was so weird, but yeah.
It's an experience.
Yeah, it is. It's a real thing that happens, that three people, and you get
sort of a rite of passage.
$17, to drive. And to somehow put enough gas in the van to drive 12 hours to California from Phoenix or whatever. But yeah, I going back to like
Going on to
comics or whatever.
comics.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Sorry.
I guess we're sort of circling back to the stuff that you read, Lainey. Are did you read more webcomics, or is this like, are we gonna go into sort of like collections and stuff?
I definitely didn't read more web comics, but um, I think the only ones that I like, they're ones that I know that I really like, but I haven't been as good at keeping up with. So I'll just briefly mention them and then say like a book that I actually have here.
Okay.
So I think Blade Maidens, just really good, really unique. I love a comic that includes like a ton of lore, as like an aside on the bottom. Like Blade Maidens does that. Kill 6 Billion Demons does that.
Oh yeah.
And it's really fun. So I love both of those. Shout out to Zoe Tunnel and Valentine Smith. And then the other one that I just really like because it's I think it's really good classic fantasy tropes, but with a new twist is Fairhaven, I think it's called. And that one is about like this orc gets lost from the battlefront, and she ends up at this like commune run by a tiefling where they're all vegetarians, and it's like very hippy dippy. And she's just like, "What the fuck, you guys? I'm hungry. Let me kill a goat." And they're like, "No, like you can stay here and recover." But it's just a very interesting tension, you know?
Yeah.
So I kind of love that like sensitive cultural treatment of orcs that are usually just supposed to be barbarians, basically.
Yeah.
But that's just that. Those are the other webcomics that I've off the top of my head. But something that I think has been really special to me is I read almost all of the Nagatakabi books this year.
Okay.
So the most famous one is called My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. It's the first one. Was originally published as a webcomic, and she kind of just put it out there as like a vent. But then it got picked up, and she became like a real mangaka. But the thing is, she's like extremely, it feels like extremely honest about what a worm she feels like all the time. And also like all of the weird fucked up feelings she has about her family, about her mom, and like realizing that she's a lesbian and she has this really estranged relationship with her mom. And she just, like there's some kind of connection she makes there with like wanting affection from women in one way and wanting affection from her mother in another way, and feeling that lack everywhere. So I think I'm just really impressed by this level of vulnerability, because the idea, I know that like all year I've been thinking about how being vulnerable and being honest about your own internal world is so important to good art, but it's like the thing that I feel the most resistant to. And so I read these and like the art is good, but the honesty is so what's really inspirational to me. Even though I feel bad that her life is like constantly messed up, basically. She has this, because the first book is she's like, oh my God, I realize I'm gay, but I'm too terrified of people to do anything about it. So I'm going to hire a lesbian, like a female sex worker. And then can't even handle being around her. And so then it's just her reflections on herself. And then it goes on and like, she's like, I'm an alcoholic. I have weird eating issues. But you just get this very zoomed in look at her internal world. I think they're really special and they're kind of crazy. And I'm impressed that anyone so anxious would be so willing to share that.
Yeah.
She's just a very interesting person.
I've seen that at my library. I'm definitely going to have to check it out now. I've read, I don't know how to like every time I see a queer book, I'm like at the library, I'm like, I want to read that. I want to enjoy it. But it's always 50-50 for me because I don't know how to express this necessarily. But there's a lot of books that like, I just feel like that these books focus super heavily on like the sort of assimilation aspects that like I'm not really with that. Like I'm not calling these books out like specifically for those things because I can't remember. I remember like liking them fine or whatever, but like Fine is one of them. Fine, there's a book called Fine, which is like about sort of like queer cultural experiences that I was just like, this is a little bit like, I don't know, like there's always what you're describing seems very real, very vulnerable, very relatable to me. And a lot of what I read, I'm like, this doesn't pertain to my daily life. This feels like a bit hokey. It feels a bit assimilatory. It's just like that whole like thing. And I'm just like, I find a hard time. I have a hard time relating to a lot of it. I have read a lot of stories, obviously, that queer stories that I do relate to a whole lot. Tilly Walden, is one of my favorites. Also, like, there's this book Drag Man that I really liked a lot. So I don't mean to sound like I'm like, they're not writing them right,
It's okay. It's okay to have stuff you like and stuff you don't like.
I mean, another one is like Mags. Mags, I would butcher her last name if I tried to say it, but she has a comic called Kim and Kim, which is about like it's about like a trans woman, and I believe like I think one is Kim and the other is Kim, and I believe it's a trans woman and a cis woman, and they're like best friends, but they're like mercenaries and stuff too, and it's fucking awesome. Like, that's not the same kind of thing that you're talking about, which is like more autobio or whatever, but like, yeah, I mean, Max
Visaggio?
Yeah. I just was afraid to say the last name. Like, yeah, I love her so much, but yeah, I've read. I mean, my library is really good about getting like. It doesn't. It's not necessarily like, oh, this is all books about like queer like ideals or whatever, but like they're really good about getting like content from queer creators and stuff. So a lot of the stories I read are very queer, but it's not like this is about me being queer. It's like a fiction or whatever, So it's like it's those types of stories that I'm like 50-50 on. They're like, this is a story about me coming out, and I'm like, I don't really relate to this because like, oh, this person has a really supportive this person, and I'm like, well, I can't speak to that, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just everybody's experience is different, and I'm glad that all of these books exist. I'm glad that there are people that can relate to this book that I can't relate to, and I'm glad that we all have our thing that we can read and get whatever we need to get out of it,
Yeah, it's a little bit like you want to have a balanced diet. I feel like the really sweet, sort of wholesome queer book is a type of queer book that's nice, and even I like making those stories. But it's like cake or something. Like you can't have cake for dinner.
Yeah. I mean, so like Doom Donuts or whatever that was called, like that, like that's sort of what you're describing. Where you read this, Donuts of Doom. It's something about donuts and doom. But yeah, that's one of the ones like what you're describing, where you read that and you're like, oh my gosh, like you're just gooey and feel good, and like, yeah, that's awesome.
It's sweet and nice, but it's like. I like reading those, but I also like to be able to walk away from that and be like, okay, now I'm going to read Dog Biscuits, or I'm going to read What Happens Next, and be like, every single one of these queers is fucked up beyond belief.
These aren't great people. Yeah. I don't know.
And that's okay. Like, that's
sure.
also really normal, because I know a lot of queer people are just people. Like, I know a lot of like trash outs.
Yeah, that's what they say on that Cerebro show all the time. I support women's rights and women's wrongs.
And women's wrongs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah. What about you, Randall? Like, what's one of the things you read this year that you really enjoyed?
I read a lot of manga this year.
Okay.
Manga. I never pronounce it the right way. But uh, my favorite, I think, is Dandadan.
Okay.
Which just had an animation
Funny.
adaptation to that.
When I bought the first volume of that at the store, I was like, "Do you have Dan to Dan?" And the person in the store literally laughed at me and was like, "You mean Don to Don?"
Oh my god.
Like that, right? And I bought it and I was like, whatever. But okay, it's on TV now, like you were just gonna say. And in the theme song, it sounds like they say Dan to Dan. Just like I was saying. And I always want to go back with that theme song playing and be like, find that person like, do you have Dan to Dan? And see if they laugh at me then, you know? But but yeah, great book, twisted book. But what you were gonna go on? For people out there who
it's like a Shonen Jump series. And it's very kind of like when you describe it, it sounds very basic and like boilerplate. It's like a guy and a girl get special powers and they have to fight ghosts and aliens, and they have like a crush on each other, and it's like a cute little thing. It doesn't really sell like how kind of zany and weird and like how good the art gets in the fights.
Yeah.
Like just in terms of like a pure like visceral like fuck yeah kind of action scenes. It's like one of the best comics I think around for that.
Yeah.
Volumes 6 through 9 came out in English this year, so like technically counts this year as something that came out. And it's like they're up to like I don't know it's like over 150 chapters now. They did like recently they did like a Jumanji kind of arc where the kids got trapped in a board game. It was really fun. Yeah, it's really crazy how it's maintained its like quality because they keep adding characters too. And I keep thinking like this is maybe too many. I don't know, but it still stays good. I don't know how.
Yeah.
The artist is Yokonobu Tatsu.
Yeah. I'll say this about people who've checked out the anime but haven't read any of the manga is that the anime I think is really good and it's really faithful. I enjoy it. But there's something about the manga where if you enjoy like the twisted sense of humor from the anime, like the manga, the way it's paced, like it makes it feel so much more fucking twisted and like out of nowhere. Like it is so much more shocking to read like gobble your dong and stuff like in the manga than it even is to hear it on the like you're like I cannot fucking believe what I just saw on this page. Like it's so wild. Like so like I 100% think like it's probably true in most cases where if you enjoyed the adaptation, it's definitely worth reading the source material. But in this one, I have to say, like, just go ahead and see if your library has them or I think the Shonen Jump app, like I heard it's only like $3 a month and literally just like hundreds of thousands of pages of manga, more manga than you could ever read, which is just
true?
like that's what I've been hearing.
The app is like $4.
Yeah,
and
it's like
it has everything. I think it has like all the backlog of like every series.
Which is like, how can it? Wow, like I mean, they I mean they're a corporate superpower, like Viz, so it's like, but we're like us little artists, we're like trying to be like $3 a month, and we're like you can read hundreds of pages, and it's like it's true, and you're like for a lot of you're like that's like a good that's a good lot of stuff to like for this price, and it's like and they're like hundreds of pages. That's cute. You know, here's
Yeah.
here's 30 years of back catalog. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the thing too about the book is that like it probably for my money is like one of the best action series, but the character the comedy with the characters is really really fun too. Like um Tatsu's just expressions that he can like pull out of like everyone's doing something goofy with their face in that given scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the you would expect maybe like the crush dynamic between the two leads kind of like it's been done, you know. When you read about it, it doesn't seem um like it'd be anything special, but that he gives them so much chemistry, and I think it's because he switches the roles. Like I didn't really think about it when I started, but now I think it's very clear how the young girl Momo Ayase, she's kind of the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're co-leads, but she's kind of the main character, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's the shy guy who like um is like the best friend supporting. So it's just a very like the action scenes kick ass. The characters are really fun, like, and there's a lot of them too. It's just a really solid book. I definitely one of my favorite reads of this year, and for the past like few years that I've been reading.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
so
Well, one of my favorite things that I've read this year, and I can't. One of my favorite, like every time this person comes out with something, I'm like, I can't wait until I get to read it. But it's this artist Jasper Jubinville. His his main like character is this character called Dynamite Diva, and she's like a Nick Fury type. She's like a spy, secret agent kind of thing.
oh yeah,
And she's complete with the eye patch, but she's like, she doesn't give a shit about anything. Like she'll party with everybody. She'll, screw who she wants to screw, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it's basically like her, every series is her just like fucking people up and like murdering like bad guys, or whatever. But the one that came out this year is called The Engine Whispers, and it's like usually the stories are more like they're less about like a theme or a plot, and it's just like this is a bunch of wild shit that happens, but it's always like really entertaining. And the art style is like sort of golden agey. Like I don't know who to compare it to necessarily, but that's the book I'm talking about right now, The Engine Whispers. And it's like this book is way more like you clearly see this was a whole thing from start to finish, like before he even started on page one, and it's about a guy that like drives a taxi, and he starts hearing like he believes that like his taxi starts talking to him and has him like murdering people. And Dynamite Diva sort of gets like framed for one of the murders, so she has to like figure out how to like catch this guy and clear her name. And by the end of it, I mean, it's like so fucked up. You're like, was an alien demon thing like actually possessing this cab? Like, I don't know. But this is one of those things too where there's like all kinds of there, I don't want to call it like bonus material because it's like in throughout the comic, but he'll do like there'll just be randomly like a page of like people like cosplaying as Dynamite Diva or like different characters or whatever, and they'll just be like it's like almost like an ad for something, and there are just like ads for like, oh, buy the new Dynamite Diva toy, but it's just like somebody took a Master of the Universe and like made like a thing out of it. But it's just like absolutely just like fucking wild art and just like wild concepts, like from start to
That was
finish.
so cool.
And it just like the cartooning is just fucking. And
It's
this person is
beautiful.
like 21, 22 years old. Like,
Oh, God.
it's just going to be ridiculous. Like, when you get to see, hopefully this is somebody who wants to stick with it, and
Yeah.
when you get to see like 10, 15, 20 years of this person's work, it's just like holy shit. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts, but I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
okay. But that's one of
I
the
never-
things that I really was like, I got that and I was like, holy shit. Yeah.
Who put that out? That looked really cool.
Well, I think that I think I saw something that like he might be like represented by someone now and he might be publishing books with someone in the future, but everything that I've gotten from him like has literally come like he packed it and published it and mailed it to me himself. Like,
That's cool.
yeah, the only like the other collected edition he has, I don't remember. Like I think this is technically Dynamite Diva book 4. I don't know what the other collection I have is. I want to say he called it book 2, but it's like at that point it was like all of the Dynamite Divas like that were available. I don't know what book 3 is. I don't, but the only other
That's
thing
interesting.
that I've seen that he's done between the Dynamite Diva collection and that was this thing, I believe it was called Milkmaids, which it was basically like it was a zine, and like I did end up getting that, and that was really cool too. It was like this weird it was this weird borderline. It was like his take on like Handmaid's Tale or something. Not like Handmaid's Tale, like the politics of it, but there's just this real weird like aspect of like there's some government control over like breeding and stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was really good too. But I like, it's a lot less to speak on, sort of it just being a zine, and there's just this like the main character like invades this factory where they're storing everyone's cum, and you're like, that does not sound like anything that like people should be reading, but it was awesome. Like I read it and I was like, this is fucking awesome, like that's all I can say. Yeah. But
Yeah, I'm gonna look that up. That looks really cool.
yeah, that Dynamite Diva stuff is fucking amazing. Like that, I look forward to, hearing about whatever else this person will be working on. You said you had a lot of thoughts on on Dynamite Diva.
It looks completely gorgeous. And I mean, you mentioned it looks sort of golden agey, silver agey. Like there are some ways the faces are like wide and sort of geometric. That, I mean, I guess you could call it anything from that era, but it calls to mind Jack Kirby for me a little bit, just the like
Sure.
this really solid shadows. But then everybody else too. But then I think like having those inserts is such another level of like showing love for that era, because that's what reading comics was like, is you had little inserts of other things and like more interaction with the world. Like I don't know, that that makes me excited because it sounds like this person loves comics on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
think that
it's cool to see.
I'm not sure 100% if I'm thinking of this right, but I think that the main like person from back then that I'm thinking of is the person who drew the Dick Tracy comics. Like, was it Chester Gould or something like that?
I don't
Like,
know.
yeah, I'm not
I don't
sure,
know.
but I feel like the, I mean, you know, like anybody who like loves that era of comics is like rolling over in their future grave or whatever at this point. But I think that's the name. I have read comics with that art style and stuff before, but not, you know, to the level where I could say like three or four artists. You know, it's just like when you see it, that's what it reminds you of. You know, that sort of Dick
And
Tracy, um, those sort of World War II era. You know, like sort of like early Joe Simon and stuff like that. You know, like the Joe Simon like art, not when, you know, he was writing for Kirby or
right.
whatever, but like yeah, even early Kirby is a lot more like that because he was trying to be like that before he
Yeah.
really was like, oh, I want to draw everybody huge and with big jaws, and you know, which like we
Yeah.
all love that too, but yeah, so I think we're back around to you, Lainey.
Okay.
What else were you enjoying this year?
So I feel like I don't know. There's in terms of I want to talk about like both of these together, even though they're pretty different because they're the most arty kind of comics that I pulled out.
Okay.
So there, it's Stray by Molly Mendoza, which I think came out either last year or the year before, but I didn't get a chance to read until this year, which I bought at Cake. But I really love Molly Mendoza. She just does really incredible, like painterly comics. I have like her first one was through No Brow called Skip, and it's this,
Yeah, that
yeah,
knew I recognized that name. I'm
yeah.
friends with someone that's friends with Molly as well, and so when I
She
read that, like my friend was like, "That's my
it's
friend,"
just
and I
like
was,
it's like mind blowing. Like
yeah,
it's one of those people where I'm like, I'm just glad you exist. I'm never gonna be good like you're good. And so I just enjoy being able to appreciate this. But this is a really sort of like I don't know. She does this kind of like poetic, queer sad story type thing. In a couple of like this also exists. She has a short in Shades of Fear, the horror anthology, which kind of reminds me of this. But it's essentially just like a sad queer person goes through a breakup and then meets someone else, and they sort of are comforts for each other. But I feel like it's really so much more of the storytelling is visual and like color based than it really is about even knowing who the characters are or what they're saying or anything. Like you get a lot more information just seeing I don't
mm-hmm.
know how things shift from page to page in a way that I feel like I could just keep coming back to forever and feeling really inspired and informed by it. And that kind of comic I feel like especially as like a comics artist who's trying to learn new stuff, like those things are really useful and important to have because you can come back and be like, this person pushed themselves and it made the story better. How can I push myself? And like, what's unique about this?
Yeah,
But yeah, so I just really love all of her lyrics, but this is the one that I read this year. And she makes really good use of like color and texture together.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, here's another one. Like, there's a lot of scenes where there's these crazy, like the stripes, of the shadows of the blinds over them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really, I don't know that I could articulate quite what it probably means symbolically, but it evokes a really specific feeling.
Yeah. I didn't get this impression so much from Skip. I feel like that was a lot more brightly colored or whatever, but that what you're all showing here really reminds me of like Emily Carroll or something.
Yeah.
Like like the how the blacks like create a structure and then the
Mm-hmm.
colors like create the mood and the intention or whatever almost. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Skip, I feel it's more it's just as complex, but it's friendly to kids. This definitely feels a lot like darker
Yeah,
in a different way, but they're
yeah,
both really good. And
yeah.
then the other one that also like uses color and texture so well, and I would say is sort of arty but more narrative, is Rebetico by David Prudhomme. Uh,
Okay.
um, and this one, it says it was published by Self Made Hero, but this is about a really specific point in time, like Greece in 1936, where there's some kind of military dictatorship, but these guys are all just spending every day basically smoking hookah and making this music, Rebetiko, which is like a mixture of traditional Greek folk music and like Turkish and all these other influences, and just
That's
trying to
cool.
live their life. Yeah, so it feels like thoroughly researched and I don't know, a portion of history that I would never know about or think to even look into if not for this. And the way that it's done with all of these really warm colors, it feels like being able to sort of seep into that a little bubble of the world that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really a kind of historical comic that feels more exciting to me. Um, but yeah, so those two I really liked, and I felt like you just get a lot of instruction from reading
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of artistic capability.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on talking about this one, but when you're like, oh, this is like a queer comic about like breakups and stuff, there was something I read recently called Firebug, which I really enjoyed it a lot, and I could talk about it quite a bit, but it was just, and it's an artist that I wasn't really familiar with. I don't remember the name offhand, but the art style was just really good. It's like a lot of stuff where it's like sort of like, wow, like they they don't they don't seem to worry about having a model to stay on brand with as far as like faces, et cetera, et cetera. They just really want to get all of the sort of emotion and the context onto the page. Like they're not worried about anatomy so much all the time. They're not worried, but yeah, that was one of those ones too where it's like you're reading it and you're like every once in a while you're like, damn, that like really hit right there, because it's like it's about how being in love is hard and being and breaking up is hard, and stuff like that, and navigating like queer couple situations and it struggles with like your own identities and stuff like that, and not knowing where you land on that. But yeah, Randall, what else have you read that? Are you still in manga territory, or you said you read a lot of manga?
I did. The other big thing I wanted to make sure I got in there was I read all of or most of um, the Gilbert Hernandez side of Love and Rockets, the Palomar stories.
Okay.
I read the first three of the library trades for that, and it's some of my favorites, my favorite comics ever. I think it's just really dense, a lot of characters, a lot of different types of stories, great cartooning. Um, sorry.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, my library doesn't have like the best, like, they've got like the little like almost like digest size ones. They've got those like sort
Yeah.
of like starting from the beginning up to like maybe 5 or something. So I've read those a lot of times. I don't know what any of these things, I don't know if that's the most linear way to read it or what. But then they just have random like enormous collections. Like they've got the huge like omnibus of like one called Luba, and I've read that one several times.
Okay.
And they've got another omnibus size one called Palomar, and I've read that one several times.
Well, I read the ones I get are these ones. They're like the Fantagraphic paperback library ones.
Yeah, the sort of thinner ones. Or wait, no, not
Yeah,
that. That's not the one I'm thinking of. But yeah, like the ones that I've read, they're sort of thinner. They're like, yeah, they're smaller. As much as I've read some of those, and as much as I enjoy them, I really need to, like, just be like, okay, every time there's a birthday or holiday that somebody's going to buy me a gift, like buy me the next one, of like that edition that you
yeah,
two are showing me, because I
yeah. These
enjoy them
ones are
so
really
much. But
easy. These are really easy to get into because they separate them by brother. So like I think the first one is um I don't know which one the first one is, but it goes Jaime and Gilbert. So like the odd numbers are like one brothers, and the evens are the others. So I just read my trade is the one I have is called Heartbreak Soup. I think is the first one.
yeah,
It's Heartbreak Soup, Human Diastrophism, Diastrophism, whatever that one is, and then Beyond Palomar. And I think that covers like the first 50 issues of Love and Rockets, or all of like that stuff that Gilbert does.
yeah. I recently read one that was like a specific collection called Heartbreak Soup and Other Stories, and so I probably
Yeah, and
read.
they do like trades sometimes too. They
Yeah,
do like regular hardbacks, and
yeah,
it can be kind of weird.
and
Yeah,
like,
it's a little like Hellboy or something where it's just like there's no way to know where to jump in. Like this was a gift. This booklet that I have, Maggie the Mechanic, was a gift. I haven't read it yet because I'm sort of like I'm intimidated to
yeah,
start anywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
that one is the first one of Jaime's storylines.
really.
Yeah, and that one's kind of weird because it's like he starts off not really knowing what to do. So there's like weird sci-fi stuff that
oh,
like
I
goes
fucking
away
love that
halfway
shit
through.
though. It's so
Yeah,
good. You're like, what is this? There's like, there, you're reading like, I mean, you can be reading one of these trades, and one minute you're reading about this, like, about these two friends, and one of these girls is clearly in love with the other girl or whatever, and you're just reading this like very like whatever down to earth like story about these two people, and then you're like, the next thing you know, you're like, wait, these people are on an alien planet and they're like subjugating the like life forms that live there, and like this one guy wants to fuck one of
yeah.
them, or like, and you're like, what?
That's how that one is.
Yeah, and
Wow.
Is it?
it's so wild reading them
'Cause-
collected like that. Like I love it, and I'm like, I'm always like, damn, this is like, I'm always like, I'm always taking the stuff that I do. I'm always like, I need more practice before I get into these big ideas, right? I need more practice. I can't ruin my big idea by not being practiced enough. And so I'm like, oh, I'm right. I'll write this. I'll make this zine about cooking. Like, it's fun. People like that. I enjoy doing it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy doing it. But like, really what I'm practicing too, right? I'm getting two things out of it. And really what I'm like, no, what I was made to do, what I was put on this planet to do is write weirdo stories that go from two girls on the street that secretly love each other to some guy that wants to fuck an alien, like, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm meant to be doing weirdo shit like that, and I'm not doing it. Like, what's wrong, and then I get pneumonia and I'm like, I could die tomorrow and I'll never write that weirdo story, and yeah, it's like, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
what,
and that's
I love it so much about that older stuff specifically. But yeah,
and even after that, like there's in that first trade, Maggie the Mechanic, like it's still Maggie from like later stories, and she still is like the mechanic thing is part of her like background. But then like I remember there's that story in the beginning where she's like in the jungle and there's like dinosaurs and shit.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh, this is the same Maggie from. And even when it gets more like grounded and realistic, like Jaime will do shit like, oh yeah, Maggie, her aunt is like a pro wrestling like champion, and the whole chapter is dedicated to like a little world of like women's pro wrestling that like I don't think it existed to the extent that is in his book.
yeah,
But it's just like he's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna make it this
Yeah.
That's what I like about the brothers.
And then they just get so wild with like a lot of that Luba stuff, like where it's like, oh, and then there's this movie star, and then there's these impersonators, and then like it's
yeah,
so
the
wild.
fucking. I just got to that stuff too because just for like context for people who don't know, like Luba is a character. She meets her like long lost sisters. She moves to LA, and then one of her sisters becomes an actress. And the actress, she's like in movies that are fictional, like made up movies, but they do like whole ass graphic novels of them. Because I picked up one and I was like, I know this character, but like, what is this? And then I read another thing, and it's like it's all. He did a graphic novel for the fake movie from his other comic, and then one of them is an adaptation of the Luba family story, Poison River, which is like this really long like crime saga about Latin America in the '70s, and like there's like police and like communist revolutionaries, and her like her younger sister is starring in an adaptation of that family's historical story. He gets so, especially Gilbert. Gilbert does this a lot. Right? He just like plays with his own. I don't know. It gets crazy.
Yeah,
But
it's so wild. And I
yeah,
mean, if people are listening, we're sort of been recording for about an hour and a half, and if people are listening at this point and you haven't read Love and Rockets, I know, like Lainey, you're probably like, this is so intimidating. There's so much of it, and like, what if I sort of start in the wrong spot, or whatever? I feel like you could start in any spot, and all of it is going to make more or less the same amount of sense. Like that's just the way these stories are, and you're going to enjoy
Yeah.
them like no matter what. I think you'll
yeah,
enjoy them so much that you probably will be like, I really want to know what this was like in chronological order or whatever, but you don't have to read it like that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is absolutely, for sure. Just, I mean,
yeah. I mean,
top.
all the art and the cartooning is and the storytelling is like top notch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
This is
look at
killer.
this and I'm like, this is like when this is like top tier, is you're like, this bit of hair on this character is solid black, and it's like perfect. Like I don't know how to explain it, but when you're looking at this cartooning and you're like, the economy of line, I believe, is like generally the term that people use. The economy of
Yeah,
line is like 10 out of 10. There's just
Yeah.
no wasted, and it's not out of like laziness or whatever, obviously. You know what I mean? It's not out of like lack of skill. It's just like you're like, the iconography is perfect, the economy of line is perfect. It's just like, I mean, every page is like an instruction manual on how you should do this.
I mean, I just opened to a random page, and I mean, sorry to the people listening who can't see this, but I opened to page 108 on Maggie the Mechanic, if you have it handy. But like,
Open
looking
your
at
prayer book to
yeah, open your open your textbooks. But okay, I'm gonna see if I can hold this up. But like up here, where you can see like the hair is just blending into the shadow of the car so
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah.
Like they really understand light and composition so well to like lead your eye just right. And like here where the car,
Yeah.
and then there's explosion, and then there's black, and then there's white. So your eye just moves exactly how it should.
yeah,
And
you
here,
see,
where like you just see the light outline of her eye in this backdrop because she's wrestling. I mean, it really is kick-ass. I think that's part of why it intimidates me. Like anything that I know I'm really gonna love, whether it's books or comics or whatever, I look at that and go, I'm gonna love that so much. I can't read it yet, or can't look at it yet.
Yeah, I do
For
that
some
so
reason, I
much.
have to like save it for the worst day
Yeah.
of the year, and then I will pick it up.
I've got volume 1 of the oversized Berserker or Berserk manga, and
Oh, yeah.
I've never read any of that, and I've got volume 1 of the oversized and I've had it for like, I got it for my birthday, which was in March, and I've had it since March, and I'm like, oh, well, another thing about Berserk specifically is there's so much of it and I can't afford it. So that's the other thing. I know if I start reading it, I'm going to be like, I want the next one right now. And I just can't get it. I don't have $50, you know? So like, yeah. So that's the other thing with that. But like one of my favorite series, and like this is another thing, like I don't get into the problematic nature of some of it, but like is Why the Last Man. And when the last issue of that came out, I did not read the last issue of that for like 3 months because I was just like, how am I gonna like grapple with this being over, you know, or just like wanting to be like savoring it and just wanting to be, I got to be so present with this when I read it, you know, and
I still haven't seen the last 2 episodes of Cowboy Bebop. I watched all of it in 2016, except for the last 2 episodes, and then I was like, I can't handle this, and I haven't seen the end. I don't know what happens because I was that same feeling of being like, I can't deal with this.
I can't close the book on this yet.
I like it too much.
Yeah. I don't even remember whose turn it was now.
I just went.
Okay.
So I think it was your turn.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, Love and Rockets is my favorite this year and every year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so good, and like I said, I've reread some of that so many times, and I keep going back to. I need to. There's
one more thing I want to say about Love and Rockets, which is just, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, there's like a page from Love and Rockets that I feel like gets passed around in cartooning internet a lot, where it's like side by side in a bar, a group of friends, and one is where they're younger, and then they're posed more or less the same, but then there's a picture in the back standing where one of the people was standing, but now you can, like, that's how you know that she's dead, is that there's a picture on the wall of the bar or something, and it's her, and then everyone else is older. And
I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
I remember because I saw that after I had drawn this page, but in the scene in Crash Coral chapter, I don't know, probably 9 or something, when they meet the old friend of the family who like knew them from way back when, and they're sitting in the bar. I hadn't read that or seen that, but I remember being like, the compositions are similar. Like I did a similar thing, and it's cool to feel like connected to comics world. And I know that you really love Love and Rockets, so I wondered if like you were thinking about that or something like that at all when you were writing that scene.
No, I don't know if I'd gotten. I think that's later in the Love and Rockets. I haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah,
I've seen that image.
Yeah, I
make the connection.
I might know exactly what you're talking about, but I can't think of it offhand for sure. But okay, so Lainey, I don't think that you are into the sort of big 2 superhero stuff as much as, you know, Randall and I have been. I'm certainly not really into it like as much as I was, you know, even like 2 years ago or whatever, when I was really enjoying most of the X-Men books. So like, I'll just sort of like go through like this sort of, you know, mainstream comics that I have enjoyed and not really, you know, I
can share mine too. We can have a little.
Yeah, we'll just like sort of rapid fire on them.
Superhero corner.
Yeah. Ultimate Spider-Man, I've loved it. A lot of people were like, "Oh, what's this?" You know, it's not Spider-Man, you know, but I think it is the best Spider-Man story in a long time. That's just my opinion. I also think that the Scarlet Witch book has been super good, like pretty much.
Oh yeah.
Like since it started, like it's now in its like sort of 3rd iteration. Like the second one was like Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, or Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, one of those two. But then there was one before that. It's basically been the same book the whole time. It's the same writer.
I read that first volume. That first volume was pretty good.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. The Scarlet Witch is one of those characters, obviously, like as far as like continuity goes, you're like, wow, there's like a lot of problems, you know, here, but I've always liked the character. like I said, I was really enjoying all the X books, like in the Hickman sort of era or whatever, and so all the X books now have been hard to. It's hard to feel anything except for sort of a mild disappointment. I have liked
Yeah.
the Knicks book, the most out of maybe all of them, and I did read the Laura Kinney Wolverine #1, which I liked it, but it's just I feel like I liked it because I like Laura Kinney, especially as Wolverine. So I don't know,
Yeah.
I did read that All New Venom. I thought that was fun, but I don't know if I care about like a Venom. West
Yeah.
Coast Avengers #1. Like that was just. It was
Okay.
just not. It was just not. It was not it. And somebody's gonna be like, what do you know? Look at your bullshit art, But that
That's
was
still not the point, though. You're allowed to like art, not like art. Like that's essential, an
Yeah.
essential part of art. Like
it's like I don't know, more or less the story is like Ultron is on the Avengers and later Ultron forms a cult and like that tracks for me and that was like kind of interesting. But like yeah, the art was just it's really wild. The I have a lot of scenes where it's like I'm like specifically this story that I'm doing right now, it's like I'm conducting an interview and I'm like there's no background when I'm asking the questions and I'm like, wow, I feel so lazy. But this is like Marvel Comics and they're charging like $5 and like none of these scenes have backgrounds. Like none of them. And it just was wild. Like this artist must have like
that does make me wonder about the timeline that they expected.
they must have got the pages with like 15 days to do 30 pages, or there was a personal tragedy, or just like some because it's just wild. And I West Coast Avengers is one of those things. It's like a cult classic, like that title, there's always something weird about it that's like enticing to me or whatever. And I was just every time they try it anymore, it lasts like 10 issues and I was just like, people are not gonna buy this. Like I don't know if I'm gonna buy it. The second issue I'd have to look through that and be like, oh well, clearly they had more time, or clearly they whatever. But I said I wasn't going to talk about that forever, and then I just did. But yeah, DC Birds of Prey, fucking amazing book.
Yeah, real good.
Absolute Wonder Woman, like that's I've said it before. That is the book. That is what every Wonder Woman book should feel like. Like there's Wonder Woman. To me, it's like it should not be hard to make a Wonder Woman book that is that good. But like no one can do it, And I think Kelly Thompson like is one of them, like maybe to me personally, the most underrated writer out there. There is not anything that she does where I'm just not like, this is fucking 10 out of 10. I didn't like the Cull as much, but that's just like I think that art style really was weird for that book. And that art style was like immaculate. It's like the most clean artwork.
It's like photorealistic.
Yeah, super photorealistic and just
it's really, really intense.
For that book, I just think that took me out of it, but like, yeah.
As a personal preference, I don't love when people are trying to be really photorealistic. It's kind of like when the live action Lion King came out. Like I feel the same about that in comics, where it's like you take so much stylization out of it that you lose some emotion.
Yeah, you
can. That book was really interesting because it was like it reminded me of like Annihilation, kind of. Like there was like character stuff going on, but also like monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So like the photorealism kind of worked in places, but I don't know. It was kind of weird, but
yeah. Are there any other two books that you wanted to speak about, like real quick, like before we move on from that?
Okay. Let's see. I like the new Storm book so far. That's fun.
Yeah, I haven't checked that out yet. I heard they're done
It's
in
only
ones.
3 issues.
I heard they're like done in ones. Like each
No,
no? Oh, that's what somebody was saying, which I was like, that's weird because Fantastic Four is supposedly like that, and like that'd be weird for them to have like several books that are sort of like each one is its own contained story.
No, there's only been 3 issues so far, and they all go together.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but it looks great. It's Storm. She never gets a book, so it's fun to see her stuff. Ultimates by Dennis Camp and Juan Frieri and Phil Noto. Probably one of the better superhero books this year, along with Ultimate Spider-Man as well. I really liked Boy Wonder by Junie Baugh. It was a DC Black Label book about Robin.
Yeah.
But
I really like Junie Baugh.
Me too.
Really cool
Yeah.
art.
I just think I was in the store and I was like, I think those issues were like $6 each, and I just don't necessarily like Robin that much. So I was like,
Yeah, that's tough.
yeah, I was like, it's either this or something else that's a couple bucks less, and I like the character.
It's a really
more.
good book.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, where I can pick what I buy based on the character, like in a way that like I'm like, this is Batman related. My library is 100% getting this. Like I don't have to buy this. Like I can read it 6 months from now, And also, I'll probably enjoy it more because I can read it more or less in a sitting and a half, or whatever. So yeah, I also was like, this looks fucking really great, but like, I was like a couple things to weigh there and didn't end up picking that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, no, that's really real.
Yeah.
I did read. I think I read one thing that is Big Two related. I think this year, which was Nubia Real One.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember if it came out this year or last year.
I've got that on my library hold list actually. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's fun. It's cool. It's cool to see. It's one of those moments where I think, who does this? Is that probably Marvel or DC?
That's DC.
That's DC. It's part of their like YA OGN line, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It seemed like a moment where they were like, let's just really invest in a bunch of Black creatives and see what their take is on this. And it became a really cool and interesting story. And I don't know, they brought a lot of style to it, which I liked. That's the only thing that I read. But I recommend it. It's good.
Yeah.
And then another one I wanted to mention was the Zatanna book by Mariko Tamaki and Javier Rodriguez.
That was really good.
One of the best looking books this year. It's fucking...
What is
Rodriguez is phenomenal. It's called Zatanna Bring Down the House.
Yeah.
It was like a prestige... It's another Black Label DC thing, but it's like a prestige miniseries. I don't know if you're familiar with Javier Rodriguez.
Only Tamaki. I don't know Javier Rodriguez.
Yeah,
I don't think.
He's one of the best out there right now. It's like super like Darwin Cook influenced kind of, but takes it somewhere else that I can't put a finger on.
Like Darwin Cook and like Jim Steranko psychedelic shit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, some of those fucking pages in that were like, it really reminds you of like old like J.H. Williams Promethea, like the stuff he did with Alan Moore and stuff in a way, but that's all like extremely Steranko influenced, like you mentioned, where it's just like you have like 2 pages and the text is winding around in some weird way, and it's like this would nauseate the shit out of me if it didn't look so fucking incredible. Like if somebody did this wrong, you'd be like, oh gosh, why? You should have just did 9-panel grid, like, but when somebody can really do it, you're like, oh shit, and Javier Rodriguez, like, is just fucking incredible. Last thing he did was that Defenders series, right? That was him, right?
Well, I mean, besides, he did, but the last thing was that book, I think.
Was
and he's doing the Zatanna book.
Yeah, I mean before that though.
Yeah.
Other than like, he's a part of.
Oh, he did a one shot, I think.
Oh.
He did the Starfire one shot.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it was really weird, but it looked good too. And he's doing the absolute Martian Manhunter or
Oh
whatever
really? That's
whatever that
him?
character.
That's with
Yeah,
Dan Waters, right?
Denny's Camp is
Oh,
doing
that's
that one.
Dennis Camp. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably check that out. Um Speaking of Dennis Camp, I finally did read 20th Century Men, and we're
yeah.
you know, this is one that Randall's been like, this is the best. It's one of the best books I've read in 10 years. Um, and yeah, I really enjoy it, and I do see why, like, you would say that. And I think that I think that if it was about literally anything else, but it had the same feel and it had the same heart, like if it was about literally anything except for like basically it's a war story, I think I would have enjoyed it more, you know? But it's not really a
Okay.
war story either. You know what I'm saying though? It's like, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
it
kind
took
of.
like super big swings, and I could see how where there's so many sort of like narrative devices that the writer employs, like I don't know if I'm using that term right either, but like how like okay, this whole issue is going to be like there's no dialogue or whatever or hardly any dialogue, but everything is like excerpts from newsprint or whatever. And then
Oh yeah, the one about the yeah. I know
there's
what you
like
mean.
other ones that are sort of like here's one single image on a page with like this text going down either side. So it took like really big swings, and
Yeah,
there's like a few cornerstones of like relationships that happen throughout it that are like towards the end they really sort of like pay off without ever actually over explaining anything, and like you know
yeah,
things like that. And but yeah, I thought it was really good, and that was one of those things too where the artist, and I actually do have that right here, so I'll look. The artist Stepan Morian,
Stepan. Yeah,
like that way that the artist goes from like not hyper realism, but like all the figures are they're very well articulated, et cetera, to just like so much less so articulated, and they're more
yeah,
gestural. The way this happens from scene to scene sometimes was like immaculate. Like it could have been done
yeah,
so wrong, but like this just shows like what I'm like sort of what a stranglehold they have on like their different abilities and the way they convey them. And there's wild shit in it too, like just the unexplained shit, which is awesome, which you can
yeah,
really only do in comics. Like you could do this in a film, but it's just like they're having this board meeting where the president, who's this superpowered guy, is in this board meeting, and one of the board people in the meeting is like just it's unexplained. No one else is like this in the whole book, but this guy is just an anthropomorphic pig. And you're like, I get it. I get it. And it's like it's not explained, it's not commented on. It's just that one
yeah,
person is an anthropomorphic pig. Everyone is acting like pigs, you know, like they would in a board meeting like that. But like this
yeah.
person
Because
is
cause
literally a
he's
pig.
talking to because he's talking to I think that's the scene where he's talking to like the military contractors and shit,
Yeah, and
right?
they're like, and they're like, they bring in
And
all these lawyers and
yeah,
everything else.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's wild. Like,
My,
yeah, just great
one of
comic.
my favorite kind of part of that, like, is the issue with the American suicide bombers. They're like football players.
Oh yeah,
They like have football helmets and shit.
uh huh.
Yeah, that it's insane.
Yeah,
Um,
that
yeah, that looks crazy.
that was primarily in the issue where I was talking about where they're having just like sort of excerpts from newspapers or like you know field reports or
Yeah,
whatever, and they're and
it's it's three different sources. It's like Russian journalist, um, an American
like
point of view, and
tabloid
then
almost. Yeah, and then like
Yeah, and then the
the
third one
writer
is
who's there.
the girl, the from Afghanistan,
Azra?
the Afghani girl.
Was her name
It's not
Azra?
her. I don't think it's like someone who grew up.
Oh,
It's
I
like
thought it was
a
like the guy
a
that
future book. Yeah.
one of them
That's
is
the
the guy
journalist
that
one.
the journalist that he was like, you don't want to come with me, you'll get killed. And the
Yeah,
guy's like one of
but
the,
those are
yeah,
those are like the three like fictional texts in the issue.
yeah,
It's really good.
yeah. And I mean, it's like, it says on the back it's 6 issues, but it's like, those are 6 hefty ass like issues. That thing is,
Yeah,
that doesn't
that thing
feel
is
like 6
beefy.
issues of a comic. It feels like 12, you know, it's like they're probably double sized. But, yeah, anyway, that's sort of like, you know, I don't know. I hope that, you know, I hope that a lot of these things that they have coming up from Marvel or DC or whatever, like you know, the Martian Manhunter, I hope that all that stuff is good, like, because, you know,
Yeah.
that stuff, obviously, that stuff scratches an itch for me for sure. But it's just been lately, it's just been like, oh, okay, you know. But yeah, you know, moving past that, I guess, sort of like, what else did you want to chat about, Lainey?
I feel like I just have one other one that I wanted to, like one or two, definitely. Oh, okay. These ones, I feel like, just in turn, these ones are like incredible in terms of classic craft and equally inspiration to me as where I want my art to
Oh
be
yeah.
going. One of them is It Took Luke.
Okay.
Kind of for obvious reasons. If you're at all familiar with Bailey Underwood's art,
Bailey, yeah.
she kicks ass. It's like
He's so fucking good. It's crazy.
she can't help but like put everything into every page, and it really shows. I don't know, like there's just a level of craft and like doing everything either G-nib or micron pen, and then also the writing of this book is really good. Mark Bouchard, I've met them like once or twice, and they're because they're also a Chicago person, but they're
Oh, are they?
yeah. So I met them at Cake, and then like ran into them once downtown randomly. But they're super nice, but they're also just a really good writer. Like when you read this, I feel like there's a minimalism of dialogue that I appreciate, and there's like a little bit of quippiness, but there are just a couple of things where like you can feel that intentionally a line was set at the very beginning, and then it comes up just enough that it doesn't feel like trying too hard to hammer home that this is a motif, but just that you pick it right back up at the right moment. So they work together really well. Like there's a really good synergy, and also just like you can tell Bailey is really inspired by manga a lot, and so you get a lot of that same like energy and motion that I feel like American comics just they do it, but they do it differently. And so whenever I'm trying to be like, how do I do motion better? How do I make things like balanced realism and detail with a sense of flow? Like this is what I come back to look at. Like, I'm sorry that I'm sideways, but it's the only way I can charge my iPad.
Yeah.
But stuff like this, where like you feel the push so intensely. And then the other one that I feel like I like Michael Sweatter's work, but in writing and cartooning. But Josue Cruz, who does Puppy Night, this is like a really great all ages comic, but it also I feel like is just killer, truly kick ass. Like you can tell that Josue grew up reading a lot of like Asterix and Obelix, but then brings a whole other level of fun and joy and sweetness, but also attention to detail that I find sort of equally inspirational. Like there's funniness, but there's also like a really lovely artistry that doesn't over exaggerate itself. So it's like there if you're looking for it, but if you're not and you're just a kid reading this, then you just get the story is so good and it's so fun. So it's like really approachable. But then if you're looking at it from sort of a craft perspective, you get just as much, if not more, out of it. So those are two books and sort of teams that I wanted to shout out as sources of inspiration and like people that push me to want to improve Like,
Yeah. Bailey's so good. I have no idea how she does it. It's unfair.
I mean,
And
yeah, it's
I know
wild.
she's working on a new graphic novel, I think. I don't know when it's coming out. I'm like,
I
I
don't
need
know.
more, I need more Bailey art. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Um,
just sucks. It kind of takes like 8 hours a day to do to do this
yeah,
stuff
for real.
Yeah.
sometimes.
No, that's what she's always like, oh, I feel bad, I'm so slow. And it's like, yeah, but it's like you're doing
I
the
don't
things
know.
that
Yeah.
that a mangaka's team does. Like the
Yeah.
reason for that is because you're going crazy hard, and really you should be being paid and have a team to be able to do that and live.
Yeah.
But I do
Yeah.
appreciate being able to look at it. Um, yeah, really, really good shit. And then I don't have any of either of her books because because I read them and I love them, but they were actually bought by my ex-girlfriend, so she kept them. But the It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the impending
And
blindness of Billy Scott.
yeah, The
Is that
Impending
one?
Blindness, Billy Scott. And then the one I do have is the Hack Slash, which is also really good.
Yeah, that was really
All of
good.
equally like another person who I like Bailey. I'm just like, it's unfair that you're so good, but also
Zoe
push,
Phillips.
Yeah.
the good side of that is it pushes me to be better. Just phenomenal and thoughtful and clearly cares a lot about making a good comic.
Yeah, and
What
I
is her
saw
name? Zoe?
similarities in one of the pages that you showed there, and not necessarily the art style between Zoe and Bailey, but like there was a lot going on, and the pacing reminded me of
Mhm.
it. For
Yeah, there's
sure.
something there.
Yeah, yeah,
There's they both. I think something significant is that both of them work in traditional ink, and I think that gives you a certain sensibility that you just don't get digitally.
yeah.
Um,
I wish I could. Um, I rely pretty heavily because I have like a history of nerve issues in my family, and the older I get, the worse they get. So I rely pretty heavily on like being able to use Procreate's brush features to where they will
no, it'll save you so much pain.
they'll correct your line to a degree. Like you can't set it too much, or all your line won't have any bend to it. But you can
Yeah,
do it to where it detects like this little bit of like jitter in your hand, and it helps you like smooth out your And I'll forever be like, because I will draw like. I'll do a sketch on Procreate and I'll print it, and so I can lightbox like in real
mhm.
ink or whatever, and I'll have to do it like 3 or 4 times because my hands are just, and like, I don't know, whatever. That's whatever. I'm
No,
figuring
no, yeah,
out
I
how
don't think
to make the most of my situation. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
I don't
just
mean to imply that like it's like inherently better. Just that
oh, I don't. Yeah, I
it,
didn't take it that way, and I don't think that
okay.
way either, for
Because
sure.
I work like 98% in clip as well for the
Hmm.
same reason. Like also because if you want texture, like you can either spend 3 hours doing it in ink, or you
Oh
can have a
gosh,
brush that does that.
yeah.
You know,
When you
and it
watch
really is
like
just like I just don't want my hand to fucking fall off.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
When you watch like Zoe like do like a a a brief like time lapse or something of something, and you're like literally watching her put down like 1,500 dots with like a something that looks like a precise rolling ball V5 or something, like you're like what the fuck. um
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
yeah,
labor of love for sure, and you can
it has to
tell
be.
when you look at the pages, you're like, this person, this is what they want to be doing. There's nothing about this that's like phoned in or whatever, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's awesome.
you just there's a certain type of obsession that I sometimes aspire to, and then sometimes I'm like, I think that would ruin my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. One thing that this reminds me of is one time I heard a quote from John Romita Jr., which like people either love his art or hate his art, and I'm like 50-50. I'm like, half the time I love it, half the time I'm like, what were you doing? But he said this thing once where he was like, people always ask me, what's my style? I'll tell you what my style is. It's deadline style. He's like, I got a deadline and I got to meet it. So my style is whatever gets that done by the deadline. And I'm like, you're so fucking real for that. I'm not
Straight
even
up.
playing.
Yeah.
Because, like, sometimes you just got to tell yourself, like, I'm going on a walk with my kids today. Or I'm
Yeah.
going to go ride my bike. Or whatever the
You
fuck
have
you're
to
going to
live.
do. You know? Yeah. And you just got to be like, I am going to come to terms with that other eyeball that doesn't look like it's quite in the right spot. I am not erasing this and redrawing it again, you know, or I'm going to come to terms with, instead of drawing this background, just putting a couple of black blotches back there that give you an
Give it
idea
some-
of the background,
yeah.
you know, or whatever. And yeah, it was absolutely so real for that. And I was like, I love that deadline style. Yeah.
Deadline
Yeah.
style. It's so real.
But yeah, Randall, you're up next. Do you still have some more books here?
Definitely.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I have this list. I'm not even going to get to all of it. We're going to have to end up doing another sort of rapid fire,
Yeah.
and it's too bad.
I got one more big one, and then I could do honorable mentions. And
Okay.
just list a bunch of
All right.
stuff. But my last big one was The Deviant by James Tynion and Joshua Hickson.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of my favorites of Tynion's work, and I like a lot of his stuff already.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think him doing like a more stripped down queer serial killer type of David Fincher ass
Like a book
movie
that could happen
story.
in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really interesting. It's like it's kind of it's a very interesting angle to explore, like, because the tiny it's probably part of, like, you know, his thing, but also the main character is like being a queer man, a gay man, and then like being like having the fascination with like serial killers in the way that their crimes are like sensationalized. Because it comes up in the book in like the first issue, and I think he talked about it in interviews. But like before he knew he was gay, like him hearing about like men having sex with other men was in context of like
Yeah, that's the only
it
stories
Jeffrey
that you
Dahmer?
hear. Is like
Dahmer. I think that's
bad
the guy.
people.
Yeah.
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 The first
So
story
it's a
you
really
hear.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was specifically the Dahmer thing, but yeah, that's like it's a really fascinating like story. Like it's just kind of about that. It's about like there was a serial killing in the 80s or 70s. So this like his writer insert guy is fascinated with, and he goes to the prison to visit the killer, the guy they blamed for the killing. They basically say he was innocent, but you never really. No, I guess it's not finished yet. Technically.
No,
I think
it's
the last
not. I
issue
think there's
comes
one
out.
more issue.
The last issue comes out, I think, this month or next month. So it's just a really angle to take, like, on a serial killer story that I think he does really, really well. And then the art by Hickson is fucking spooky. He does a really good job of capturing a snow at night, where it's like black, but like layers of black and gray and sleet and like the snow coming down and like sheen. He does that really, really well with like his illustrations and his colors.
Yeah.
Really, really good book.
It's like when you see stuff like that on the page, you're like, that looks so simple, and then you try it, and you're like, fuck me. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
I tried to do like a study of contract with God, but Will Eisner, like speaking of drawing rain, goes crazy.
yeah,
on that.
I was gonna say
Like-
Frank Miller as well. Frank Miller
Yeah.
back in the day, like in Sin City and stuff, where it was just like, it's black and white, and like 50% of the page is like spot blacks, just hard one, like it'll almost be like 50% of this page is one solid piece of black that just has lots of white blotches in it. And there's rain in this, there's blood in this. Like, you're like, what the fuck am I looking at? And it's just like, you're like, okay, you try to take one piece of information away from this, and you're like, okay, so it's night, so the rain is just these white lines cutting through the night. And you're like, so simple.
Yeah.
Then you try it and you're like, wrong. You're like, wrong. You're like, what am I missing? You know, but yeah, when it's done right and you look at that and you're just like, you can't talk about that to like people who aren't invested in the art form of comics in one way or another, because they're just like, yeah, it looks cool. What?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like, okay.
But yeah, you're looking at it
and,
and
and the way
oh shit.
and the way Hickson in that book, like, not only can he do it well, but he uses it to great effect too. Because there's that scene in the beginning where they showed the original murders, and there's a part, because the big gimmick of the book, like the big iconic thing is it's a Christmas themed killer, and he's like in like a Santa suit. And so there's a scene where the cops are chasing the guy through the blizzard, and you know, they're like, it's that thing of like the light, kind of moonlight reflecting off the snow, so it's mostly black, but like in shades of black, and you see like the killer's feet, and like it's the guy, it's a creepy guy in like a Santa suit, but like it like fades up into the night kind of, and it's just like the very effective imagery.
Yeah. And like horror is really hard to do visually as well, you know, even though you're like, well, a superhero artist should be able to do horror, right? Because you're just drawing like big monsters and stuff, but it's like so different, and the pacing is so different, and it's but that is a great book for sure.
Yeah. I think comics as a medium are really well suited to horror, but you can't go into it thinking it's like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't draw it like it's an action comic. Like, but the fact that comics are self-paced, I felt works really well for horror.
Yeah. I mean, I love it when horror comics are good. I love the old pulpy ones sometimes too, even though I'm like, this is corny, but I like love it, you know? I don't know. It's something I hope to get better at in my own stuff, but you know, I'm probably not there yet, but I mean, just I guess it's going back around to me. I'll sort of just go through like you know, Something is Killing the Children is always one of the best books on the stands. Saga.
Is it really good? I keep hearing about it, but
so
I can't get sort of a read on what the vibe is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, long story short, it's like monsters are real. Children can see them, but adults can't. But there's this group of monster hunters that, you know, they murder each other and they hate each other, and it's all based on sort of the politics of these different groups. But these monster hunters have like these sort of like implants that let them see the monsters, and so they can hunt the monsters. But it's just like it's just like dawn to dawn, or Dan to Dan, as I like to call it. You say this up front and you're like, this sounds a dime a dozen, you know, but it's done so fucking well. It's legitimately like it's children getting murdered in a comic book by monsters, and you literally see this shit sometimes and you're like, that's fucking horrifying. But it's enough of a comic book that you're not like crying over it necessarily. Like there are emotional beats in there where you're like, oh shit, like that's deep, that hit me, you know. But it's not necessarily those parts, you know. Yeah. But those parts, they are visceral, and they do have an impact, obviously.
Yeah, I reread actually a bunch of it. My library caught up with their trades.
Yeah, same.
So I read up to issue 30, and there's that scene. There was the scene I think in the second volume, um, where all the people are all gathered outside the school gym, and there's a monster there, but no one sees it, and then that a girl gets like eviscerated, and it's a really gut punchy like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Because it's kind of like Buffy in a way. You're like, oh, cool, yeah, hunt monsters, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then something like that, and the artist, I think,
Werther Dell'Edera.
Werther Dell'Edera, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. He's, I don't know, they are really good at pushing that line between like good horror action and then something, and then selling those like those beats.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I remember that particular moment being like, oh fuck, like Jesus,
yeah.
that's intense.
I mean, I didn't know that part about like that. I feel like the part that really works for me about that premise is it's like a sort of central terror as a kid of being like, there's a monster under my bed,
No one
and then your
believes
parent checks, and no one believes you.
Yeah.
And so the idea that it is really there, but your parents are like physically incapable of seeing it is like that's a really good, visceral, deep horror that gets at something.
Yeah.
That does make it more interesting to me.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I said, it's to me, it's always one of the best books on Stanzum. It's great, and like I said, Saga, of course, Saga needs no introduction. Still great.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read way more like Image and stuff, books from Image and stuff than I have Marvel lately, and I'm very rarely disappointed by any of that. I could go on about all that stuff, but as far as like, sort of standalone graphic novels that I have read this year, one that I really enjoyed is called The Great Beyond, and I'm spacing on the author of that, but it is essentially it's a story about a world where like your name is it factors into your like livelihood and your health as a person. So the main character is this woman who has the same name as the biggest pop star in the world. And so she's basically on the verge of death because you need people to talk about you so that you're healthy. So that you like your notoriety, like your Twitter fandom or whatever, your online fame is like directly tied to your physical existence in this world. And so this woman who has the same name as the biggest pop star, like anybody who ever says this girl's name, like is automatically, it's attributed to this like pop star. And this girl is going to get sick, and they have this idea like if they just leave this city, things won't be like this. And it's I'm underselling it by a whole fucking lot. It's one of these things where it's saying something about like it's saying something obviously about social media and how like we hang on, like likes and our online cult of personalities and the people that we like that we don't know. It's saying something about all these things, but it's also saying something about like what is the shit that really matters like in our lives, like and everything like that. And it's one of those things too where it's like the art is really fucking cool. Every page is really cool, but it's like it is 100% cartooning. It is not like it does not the buildings and stuff like that'll be like this will be accurate. This will all be like perspective grids, or not necessarily, but it'll feel like that, right? It'll all feel very real and stuff. But the characters will just like, the models are very loose. Like, it's just like, let's put this down. And, yeah, I don't know the way that this story works with the artwork and everything like that, and it's like it's is there's only a couple colors used in it, you know, and that's done like so fucking well. Yeah, just a great book, and just like I can't recommend it up enough. It's really easy to read, and I can't remember who put that one out. A lot of the stuff that I read this year was Fantagraphics, but I don't think that was Fantagraphics. But yeah, it's called The Great Beyond. It's awesome.
Nice.
Lainey, did you still have one more book that you wanted to talk about, or?
I think that's all the ones I pulled out. I mean, there's always more and more, you know, that are
For
good.
sure. Well, Randall,
But
you said you had one more that you wanted to hit on, and then, like, if something comes to you, Lainey, just like interject for sure.
Okay.
I just had honorable mentions after
Oh, okay,
DB.
okay.
Yeah, like a lot of image stuff, a lot of direct market comics in floppy form.
Mm-hmm.
Public Domain came back this year. I really like that by Chip Zdarsky.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of about an old comic book creator who somehow gets the rights back partially to his comic book creation, and he starts making new comics with his kids. And it's like a family drama thing with like comics history mixed in. Chip Zdarsky writes and draws, and it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I liked a lot of the G. Willow Wilson's books this year. She's still on Poison Ivy, which is still going, and still really good. In her fantasy book called Hunger in the Dusk.
What's it called?
Hunger in the Dusk.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the artist right now. I think it's Chris Wildgoose.
Yeah, the first
could
time
be
I
in
saw
that
that on the stands at my place, it was like issue 3. Like they either got like one copy of issue 1 and issue 2, so I never even saw it. And then I was like,
Yeah.
issue 3, like what the hell, you know? I can't start with issue 3.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a take on orcs that is a bit more sensitive than usual fantasy tropes would do.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an orc-human alliance, and it's really good fantasy stuff if you're into that.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot of Rom V this year. Rare Flavors with the artist
Yeah,
Felipe Andrade.
My place has not gotten that one either. And
Rare Flavors is really good. If you like Anthony Bourdain, I think anyone probably want to check that out. It's about an Indian demon who decides to come out of hiding because he likes food a lot and he wants to make a food documentary.
that's so real.
So he enlists this like young Indian aspiring filmmaker, and he's like, we gotta make a documentary about food. It's more heartfelt than I'm like saying, because it's like, you know, it's about life and stuff.
for sure.
That was really good. He also did he ended his Detective Comics run this year that was like also amazing. He did a book with Evan Cagle called Dawn Runner that was like really beautiful, really beautifully illustrated.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I saw the first issue on the stands. I was like, I can only buy like 4 books. I'm not that into the big mech like stories.
Yeah.
I think I literally had just read one that I didn't like. I think that Alex Packnadel did one, and I didn't care. It didn't click with me, you know. So I was just like, I don't want another big mech story right now, you know. And then everybody was like, when it finished, everybody was like, oh shit, I didn't see any of that coming. And I was like, that's my favorite thing anybody could say about a story, you know, is I didn't see it coming. So I will read it.
My thoughts on it are like, I think it's very. If you're experienced in like a lot of mech stuff, I think it's very I don't want to say typical, but there's tropes that you recognize.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've seen like a bit of Evangelion, or like not Gundam, because that's a different kind of mech thing, but like if you're familiar with Evangelion, I think you'll kind of recognize some of it.
Yeah,
and it's good. but it's plot wise, it's kind of boilerplate. So the real reason I read the book is because Evan Kickel draws it, who's like a fantastic illustrator. Who's like, you've seen Bilquis Evely's art, right?
Oh yeah,
Edie?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's
This guy Evan Kegel is like on a similar wavelength in terms
yeah,
of detail and composition and stuff.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It sort of reminded me of like what's the person who does those books with Cy Spurrier, the what's it called, like Spire or shit. I'm totally blanking
the
on
fantasy
it.
one,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's Matthias Bergera. Is
Yeah,
that him?
yeah. It sort of reminded me of that. Yeah, that's that. I I'm not gonna lie. Like I bought the volume two singles of that story issue by issue, and I was like, the story is good. I'm not. It's nothing to do with the story, but that is not why I'm buying this. Like
Yeah, yeah.
100%. I'm
I
just
know what you
like
mean.
I'm just looking at this like I can't fucking believe
Pretty
it.
pictures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he actually had just done that other story with the same artist where I can't remember what that was called either, but it was like a 3 issue, like every issue was oversized thing, which was like
Yeah.
shit.
Step by Bloody Step, I think, or
Yeah,
something
Step
like
by
that.
Bloody Step. Yeah, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not super invested in this, but every time I turn the page, I'm just like I'm blown away. So like
Yeah.
I'm invested in that way for sure. You know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ron V. Like I don't know. Like you see these writers do this sometimes, where it's just like one writer for a good 18 months will have like 9 books out a month, and you're like, and they're killing it on every single one, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I've heard him say on a podcast or whatever, and because like we know at this point that when we see these things coming out like right now, comics is much faster, but it's like this isn't work that was done this month. This was done 3 months ago, or you know, in some cases 6 months ago or a year ago. But I think I did hear him say at some point, he was like, "Yeah, I got to stop doing all this shit. Like I need to focus on like 3 or 4 things, you know." And but yeah, I mean, I've got just like a stack of books over here. I think most of them are Fantagraphics. I mean, Fantagraphics is a weird one, right? Because I think like last year they put out this book that a lot of, I can't remember what it was called, and I'm not and I think the reason that I like don't remember what it's called because I'm just like I am not interested in that whatsoever. But there was like a lot of people were like, yeah, this book's like really problematic, and like I think Fantagraphics is like sort of known for that, for like a lot of
Yeah, it's a really edgelordy publisher.
right.
Like, and I'm sometimes I'm like, that's fine. And sometimes I'm like, I simply will not buy this book.
Exactly. And also, to be fair, all these books I'm talking about that I'm looking at, they're from my library. I
Yeah.
like checked them out again because I was like, if I want to talk about this, I want to have it to like, but like just so many wild stories, and just like, I mean, this one book called Blessed Be, it's sort of in that like in that golden age like sort of illustrated style as well, and that one's like about this kid that thinks he's possessed by a demon that kills somebody and goes to prison and gets out of prison, and just like a couple of weirdos that are friends with each other and get into trouble, and then there's like all these people that are doing all these drugs, and it's just this like really weird story, and I'm like, I don't know why I like this so much. Like the art is really good, it's so fucking weird, and it has like just really weird like plot turns and stuff, and I was really into it. And then like another book, this book Milky Way, which is like so fucking weird.
Oh,
Did
I
you
think you
read
told me
that?
about that one.
Yeah, it's like
No,
there's like this guy and his girlfriend, like, he's like a really big like loser. His girlfriend like pampers him and pays for everything and blah blah blah, but he feels like he's not getting what he needs out of her, like sexually or emotionally or whatever it is. He starts babysitting for this a woman who is still breastfeeding his kid, and he starts having all these like sexual fantasies about women who breastfeed. And it's like he goes through this whole thing where he thinks he's in love with this woman. Like this book is just legitimately like fucked up, and like the cartooning is like incredible, and like it's not even, I guess it's perverse, no doubt about like what I'm explaining, where you could be like, oh yeah, this isn't perverse, but it's like, I don't know, the art doesn't oversell that like it could have, you know what I mean? But like, it's, by the time you get to the end of this and like the betrayals and like what you think was going to happen and what does happen and what doesn't happen, and just like, you're like, that was fucked up. And like, it's one of those things where like I read it and like for like 3 days I couldn't stop thinking about it. I don't know. It was like,
Yeah.
And another book that I read like that was, it's also by Fantagraphics, and it's called Tender. And
Tender, I love Beth Hetland.
have you not read this one yet?
I haven't. So I went to a Zine Not Dead, which is a thing in Chicago where people do live readings of their books. And Beth Hetland was at the one that I went to and did a live reading of like sections of Tender. And I'm not sure if this one is in it or if it's from something else, but there's one where it's just this woman. I don't even remember really what she's going through, but there's a scene where she's like trying to brush her hair. And then
it's Tender. Yeah.
Yeah. She's licking her cat and then like vomiting up all his hair, and I was just like, this Beth Hetland knows horror in a really special and like beautifully disgusting way.
Yeah, I don't want to like spoil the story because it's like, it's so fucking, but like it definitely, this book should come with a trigger warning for just like women who like are trying to or are pregnant or who have had histories with complications from pregnancy or things like, because like I've never been pregnant. I've been there 100% for people who have been pregnant. And I was just like fucked up by this book for like 2 or 3 days. And I told my wife, I said, I don't know if you want to read that. Like, it's really good.
Yeah.
And I could see you getting a lot out of it just because it's so good, but I don't know if you want to read that. And she's like, yeah, I won't,
Valid. Yeah. It's very visceral.
Yeah. It's basically, it's just about this situation where this woman is trying to get pregnant, and she's, you get to this point, you don't just get there. It happens often where you don't know what's real and what's imagined. And there's just like, there's this woman manipulating people to get what she wants. And you're like, you don't know, like, do you ever get what you want until way later, where everything is kind of revealed to be what it is. And you're like, holy shit. Like, what was that, But yeah, it definitely was one of those books where I read it and I was like, for days, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will give you nightmares for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Another one that I read like that was Blood of the Virgin. I couldn't. They didn't have that one at the library when I went to check these out. And I should have written down the author of that. But like, yeah, that was just this weird story about this guy who's trying to make this movie, and he's trying to make this like cult classic, like B movie kind of thing, and the movie's called Blood of the Virgin, and just like all this like fucked up shit that happens, like making this movie and like the relationships between the man who's making the movie and his family, the relationship between him and like one of the main actors in the movie, and just like all of this family history and all this stuff. And it was really wild. I don't even know that, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't even know if I would say those are my 3 favorite things I read this year, but they're definitely the ones where afterward I was like, whoa, I feel weird. I feel kind of changed by reading it.
Yeah.
And like, I love
like
that.
Sticks with you.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one other one. Oh. Also, was it Sammy Harkham? Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The last book that I'll bring up, I guess, and then if you think of the other thing that you want to talk about, we can go there for sure. The last book that I want to bring up is Final Cut by Charles Burns. I've
been meaning to check that one out.
If you know Charles Burns, like, it's just like, I think Charles Burns is like 70 now, and he just made this book. That's what I heard. I forgot to like look it up, but this book it's a fucking masterpiece. Like, and it's weird because only thing I've ever seen from Charles Burns before is black and white, but this is full color. And
interesting.
It's almost weird, like it being in full color. At first, it's almost weird because you're like, this doesn't track, right? But it's gorgeous. Yeah. And like, it's everything about Charles Burns, but it's in full color. And that's not better or worse to me. It's just different, right? But long story short, it's about this kid who's obsessed with movies and him and his friends who are making these like low budget movies. And really it's like kind of like when you read it in a way, like this main character, you're like, this kid makes me feel kind of gross, like he's kind of incel-y in a way, like he expects things out of people that don't, but the story as a whole, like it's so good, and the way that, like, not all of it is full color, some of it's black and white because they're watching these movies that are in black and white, and so there's like gray tones and stuff, and the way that it goes back and forth between like what you like what the characters like about these movies that they're watching, and like how it comes back into the real world and stuff, like it's just wild. And I mean, it's like, I'm a fan of like Charles Burns' other work, and I wasn't expecting to not like this, but at the same time I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I do. In a weird way, and I don't know. Yeah. I mean, just, like Daniel Clowes put out a book this year, which was called Monica. People were like shitting over that. I read it. I enjoyed it. But like Final Cut, I was like, yeah, this is a creator that's like still 100% like at the top of his game. And like, I don't know. It wowed me. I loved it.
Nice.
Did you think of the other book you were going to talk about?
Yeah, okay. I did. So this is a book that was released through Short Box a few years back, and then I bought it when they were doing their like final sale of physical stuff because they were shutting down the publisher. So I only read it probably March or April this past year, but it's called Cuckoo by Joe Sparrow. And this is another, like, the story is interesting, but what you get so much out of it is like this incredible cartooning sensibility, and he has like, there are soft shapes, but so much of the book is like geometrically rendered, like sharp, exact straight lines, and it marries that as sort of like an aesthetic choice or preference with the actual like story of the book itself, because it's sort of an important part of that you recognize, like when things are organic and soft and when they're like sharp, because that's representing kind of a break in reality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so like being able to visually depict that puts you on another level of connection with the character, because the character is like, I don't know what's going on, but occasionally, like, basically she starts to realize she has this like superpower of being able to make things be shapes, but she doesn't really understand it. But whenever it's happening, you can tell, because it becomes this very like geometric thing, these straight lines that are sort of incongruous with the world around, which is sort of also simplified shapes, but with a lot more organic curves.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so it's like, it's another thing that's totally different from the way that I draw, but because of that, and because you can tell it's so well executed, that I felt like I learned a lot from reading it. So I don't know if it still gets printed, or it's probably in a library collection. You can order it somewhere. But yeah, Cuckoo, here is like a sample page from it. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah,
awesome.
it's really good. I really loved it. I read it like 3 times. And it also deals a lot with memory, which was just sort of significant to me, because I had like people around me dealing with like memory loss a lot this year in a freaky way. And so it certain stories are good already, and then they come to you at a time in your life when it's really relevant. And so it's something that I feel like I really attached to this year in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to these stories about memories specifically because not because of the work that I'm doing in my graphic novel doesn't have anything to do with memory necessarily, although I've just mentioned it once, but it's like, it's weird how when you have these like eras in your life, and I'm sure everybody has them or whatever, like there are just parts of them that stick out like crystalline, just absolutely clear, and then you're just like, almost just like all this other stuff like feels like it happened to somebody else,
Yeah.
like or like, you could even get to the point where like, was that even real, like,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't, so I mean, that's part of the reason why I preface my story as like, maybe this happened and maybe it didn't, because like, I mean, like off the record or whatever, I'd say, yeah, this is accurate, but on the record, like, there's that thing where it's just like, other people, I'm giving my account of the events, and other people will have different versions of that.
Totally.
And I won't name people either in my stories, so that sort of makes it ambiguous anyway. But like, it's just like, and that is something that I will actually address like in the story as well later, is that like, yeah, like, when we tell these stories, like it and everybody, I feel like every writer does this to a degree, where it's like, they'll say that there's something you're trying to work out on the page, right? Mm-hmm. And so every story will have this, like, every writer will have parts of their story where it's like, this is similar to something that happened in my real life, like this conversation or whatever.
Yeah.
Or this is like really similar to this is really similar to what I talked about with my cousin. And it's like, I'm trying to hash this out. I'm trying to like deal with this in my own way. So I made it part of this story. And it's like important for me personally to always, even though I'm like saying like, hey, this is a story and I'm telling it the only way that I can tell it, is to acknowledge that like every person, fictional or not, in this story had their own motivations, their own lives, their own accounts of these stories, and et cetera, But I think that that's awesome that this story plays with memory in that way. That's it's not just like contextual, but it's like they make it visually part of the narrative.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I don't know, I really relate to that in storytelling generally. I have a lot of anxiety around like, is this okay? Is it okay if I add my perceptions of the world, or is it okay if I imagine myself in someone else's shoes or include this part of my life the way that I see it or whatever. But I think that like it's good to acknowledge that it's always going to be a mix of your limited perspective. But I think, I don't know, that's not, I think you deal with it well in your storytelling, and I admire that. And also at a certain point in storytelling, you kind of have to get over that and just be like, well, I exist as one person.
Yeah.
And so this is all I can do, is tell my side. That's the only one I have.
Yeah.
You know, like you can be empathetic, but at the same time, like recognize that limitation and at least use the limitation to make the story more interesting, I think is the better way than to just not do it at all.
For sure. Well, you know, we have gone for a while talking about comics. I feel like I didn't even touch some of my list. You know, I got Girl Juice on here. Girl Juice was so much fun. But,
I love Girl Juice.
I thought that you might say that.
Have you read Hellphone? Hellphone kicks ass.
I have not. I want to as soon as
it's just a great simple concept.
As soon as I read Girl Juice, I was like, I need to know everything that this creator does. But then I was also like, I bet Lainey's on Girl Juice because the Patreon comics that you've done, like I'm like, I get a similar-ish vibe, you know, from some of them.
I definitely, when I was trying to come up with a simpler style, I really did just look straight at Benji Nate and Michael Sweater.
Yeah.
And I don't like they're separate people and separate cartoonists. They used to be married, but they're both really good. So you're totally right about that.
Yeah, but so going from there, like as we wrap up, I know that you know I just mentioned your Patreon. What is your Patreon so people can go there and check out what you're doing, and we'll sort of like we'll get yours and then we'll get Randall's, and then you know we'll sort of like wrap up with like what we're working on for the future. But what's your Patreon where people can go and check out some of those comics? It's specifically the Say It With Cash one. Whatever you have to pay to get on Lainey's comic, like Patreon, for the Say It With Cash comic is fucking worth every penny. That one is brilliant.
Say It With Cash. I think a while ago I printed stickers that are, do you want me to mail you? I think I still have some stickers that say It With Cash on them. And then I also have some of the Do What You Love and You'll Never Stop Working.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm really proud of that. I'll mail you guys some if you want. Because I made like special editions that are just for my friends that are like brushed aluminum.
Oh damn.
Nice.
Yeah, but my Patreon, I'm trying to sort of like revamp, but it's patreon.com/roslingarts. And right now, if you go on there, you will have a backlog of like a year and a half of journal comics, some of which like never saw the light of day publicly. And a lot of behind the scenes for Crash Coral, a lot of process videos, and like me talking about what decisions I made on a particular page or like things I added in, whatever, just talking about how it comes together. So if that's something that interests you. And then for the future, I want to put up but I really love the idea of doing like some kind of Patreon exclusive comic, because I've been trying to get published for so long, and it's you know, my ideas I feel like are always just a little too weird to be for a first timer. So if you go on there, like keep an eye out, because I have a couple of ideas working. One of which is like a animal shifter, really gory horror, like Wild West type story.
That sounds cool.
I think it is. And that one I am really excited about. And then a different one that is about the world ending and people who decide not to try to solve, these teenage girls who decide not to try to solve it, but instead to start a band, and sort of like, I don't know, the idea of you know, is it worth it to try to go back to the way things were, or is it more worth it to try to live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I have on offer right now. But yeah, and then probably more journal comics. I just haven't been making them lately because I've been like moping after having a big breakup, and a lot of my old journal comics were about my ex-girlfriend. So then I was just like, I don't know what to write about anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, it happens. So you can join the Patreon. You can be there for all of it.
Awesome. Awesome. And Randall, I know you've been doing a lot on your Patreon. You've been doing a lot of prose. Like, what's your Patreon address and what can people expect there?
I think it's patreon.com/split7inch.
With a numeral 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a numeral 7, split7inch.
My Patreon is mostly short fiction, a lot of genre, short fiction, horror, fantasy. I was on a Sword and Sorcery kind of binge this fall, so a lot of that, and then a lot of behind the scenes stuff regarding Crash Coral. I do annotations chapter by chapter. So if you're a fan of Crash Coral and you've read our work, you can get some more behind the scenes stuff of that. And there's gonna be more of that, and there's gonna be more short fiction coming up too.
And that was my conversation with Lainey Williams and Randall Avilés. Thank you so much, Lainey and Randall, for taking the time to chat with me. We had a ton of technical difficulties during this chat, so I am really stoked that we were still able to provide such a fun conversation for y'all. I hope you enjoyed it wherever you are listening. If you got a second, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to go by patreon.com/humanmachine to sign up and help us support the show. Until next time, take care and do good things.